The Dallas Cowboys got another big win in week 2. We break it all down next on this episode of the Locked On Cowboys podcast.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your daily Dallas Cowboys podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked On Cowboys. Locked On Cowboys.
Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. This episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates that you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That is linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. Joining me today, as always, is Landon McCool. You can check him out on Twitter at McCoolBCB. Landon, the Dallas Cowboys got another big win here in week 2. Your thoughts on the game?
Well, we talked about it, all this week. We thought that there were 3 kind of game scripts that this game could take, right? We talked about a close win for the Cowboys, a big win for the Cowboys, and then a Jets close win. It became pretty apparent early on in this game that this was going to follow that second game script. There was definitely some points when things felt a little bit dicey or felt like it could change or the momentum could flip. But the Dallas defense specifically, controlled this game throughout. And just to kind of, I know we like to do this, but I got to spoil it a little bit real quick. They finished in the second half. This is the Jets defensive drive finishing, how they finished, right? They finished punt, fumble, punt, interception, interception, interception. And that's how you finish out a game against an inferior opponent. It was an absolute dominant performance on both sides of the ball, but obviously, especially the defense.
Well, let's start from the very beginning of this game because we actually talked about this before the game. I thought the Cowboys would be smart to, if they win the coin toss, defer, let the crowd be loud, let the Jets look a little flustered on offense and try to eat early in the first half on that side of the ball. That's not what the Mike McCarthy Cowboys did. They took the ball. They won the coin toss. They took the ball. They drove the ball right down the field, scored a touchdown, got that 7-0 lead, got a stop right away, turned right around and got a field goal. And it was 10-0 with like 7 minutes left in the first quarter. That's exactly what you want to do to teams like this. It's just don't give them a lot of life early on. Get up and get a positive game script. I thought Mike McCarthy coached a fantastic first half of this one.
Absolutely. I just want to echo that. I thought that the play calling specifically throughout this game, we could talk about the red zone and we will, but I think
we should. We got a question. We're doing this live on YouTube right now.
Yeah.
I just hope we were being conservative in the red zone, and that was only the bad part of it. It just felt like the Cowboys knew, don't turn the ball over. Get points. You're going to be fine.
They can't score. So the more points you stack, just get more and more points. You're not going to have to worry about them catching up. And I think, and again, let's keep in mind who we're facing. We were facing one of the best defenses in all of football. So, I think the main issue there was kind of the negative plays that they were getting once they kind of got into the red zone specifically that was kind of setting them back. Real quick, I do want to go back. I when they decided to receive the ball to start the game, I thought that was interesting. But I think part of that might have been the fact that they have a kicker that they just signed because Zerline obviously got injured. So I wonder if they weren't trying to test the kicker specifically on kickoffs to see exactly how well he was going to be able to handle that. And I also think it was, it's early in the season. The Cowboys offense did not get a lot of work against the Giants overall. I think that they wanted to kind of get the offense out there, get their feet wet. Honestly, it was one of the, if not the best opening drive scripts I think I can remember in a long time. And one of the things we talked about all offseason was the importance of trying to get Dak Prescott on schedule early in games. And I think that that's one thing that Mike McCarthy really accomplished well in this game.
Yeah, and what we saw from the Cowboys offense, at least early on, was a lot of short passes just to get Dak Prescott in rhythm. I believe he completed his first 13 passes of this game, which is a record for him. And then they took some shots, right? CeeDee Lamb had a nice play down the field that kind of put them in scoring position. I loved how, I loved how quick they were getting the ball out of Dak Prescott's hands, not allowing him to take a lot of hits. Now, it resulted in a lot of 3-yard receptions to the flat, a 2-yard gain to Deuce Vaughn. You have to be really efficient and effective to play that style of offense, but it worked against this defense. I just don't think like we saw last week against the Bills, you do not want to challenge this Jets defense down the field. The Cowboys really didn't.
No, and they didn't need to. That was the key. They understood that they didn't need to, and they took the risk when they had to. I talked about it all game. Like I just kept tweeting it out. The Cowboys need to find a way to be aggressive, but understand that they need to play within themselves, because a turnover could really turn this game. I mean, I think the margin of victory was best exemplified by the Garrett Wilson 68-yard touchdown, right? Like the Cowboys are completely in control of this game. Suddenly, one missed tackle by Hooker, and he scampers off for a 68-yard touchdown, and suddenly the Jets are back within a score of this game, and it changes the whole tenor of the game, especially again against a really good Jets defense. You can't continue to hope to rely to be able to drive the ball throughout the game against a defense this good, and against a pass rush this good, against a secondary this good. So the Cowboys, did a good job, and I think that's again why they were continuing to take field goals in the red zone, because they knew that, look, it's great to even get in the red zone against this defense, to travel that far to get into the scoring distance. We can't walk away with 0 points in these opportunities, especially. We know that every stack, even a small stack of 3, is going to put pressure on this Jets offense that they're not going to be able to overcome.
I want to talk about Dak Prescott later in the show, but I do want to mention CeeDee Lamb right now. I mean, this was a fantastic CeeDee Lamb game. Didn't get in the end zone, but I believe the first 8 targets he caught in this game, and just did a little bit of everything. And there was a couple third and 15s that he converted. He had a really nice grab in the middle of the field where he got upended. It feels like CeeDee Lamb has really leveled up his game, and he's got to be one of the most efficient receivers in the league, because every time he's targeted, it basically is a big game.
Yeah, I tweeted it out that he's ascending, and that's what it felt like. Like we're watching the kind of natural evolution of the player. I think he ended up with something like 11 receptions on 13 targets or something like that, if I'm not mistaken. So just incredibly efficient. And look, to think about where we've come with this player since his rookie year, he started out as kind of an explosive player, but not necessarily the most efficient player. And now he's become a target hog. He's a guy that you can just kind of constantly throw targets at, and he's going to produce. And it's not even a situation where you felt like you needed to kind of spread the ball around. CeeDee was eating. And
it didn't feel like they missed Brandon Cooks. That's not to say that Brandon Cooks is not an important part of this offense, but when you have a superstar like CeeDee Lamb, you can run your whole offense through him.
And they were able to make do with Gallup getting a couple targets here, and Tolbert, really getting his first NFL action and showing that he, belongs at that level. Not dominating, but converting some key ones, drawing a pass interference. So the pass offense was still very healthy, despite the fact that you're still missing your starting left guard. You were missing your number 2 wide receiver. Dak was still able to operate and be successful and efficient against, honestly, what is one of the best pass defenses in all of football.
Not only were you missing your starting left guard, you were missing your backup left guard. Chumadoga left right before halftime, didn't return. Right. TJ Bass came in this game, and you saw right away him struggle a little bit. And then for some of the fourth quarter, Zach Martin was banged up, and you had your 4th string left guard in there, Awesome Richards. So the offensive line had some injuries, but they held up good enough to score 30 points, win this game. Good job by them. Again, we're going to talk about Dak Prescott in a second, but I want to turn our attention to the defense, which, my goodness, Landon, what a performance by this group. We will talk about them next. This episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. You want to be 100% certain that you have access to the best qualified candidates available. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right people for your job faster and for free. All you have to do is add your job post and then add the purple hashtag hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile to spread the word that you're hiring. Simple tools like screening questions make it easy to focus on the candidates with just the right skills and experience, so you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and hire. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates that you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That is linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. The show is also brought to you by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is the largest independently owned daily fantasy sports platform in North America. It is easily the most fun and exciting way to play DFS because it's just you against the numbers. Instead of battling thousands of other players, including pros and sharks and fantasy nerds, all you have to do is pick more than or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. You can win up to 25 times your money this football season. My favorite thing about PrizePicks is there's so many different players and so many different stats that you can choose from. It's so much fun. So if you want to pick a defensive player on how many sacks they'll have, you can do that. If you want to go look at tackles and assists, you can do that as well. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use promo code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use promo code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match worth up to $100. All right, Landon, let's talk about this Cowboys defense, which was absolutely insane in this game. I believe I looked at it right before we jumped on. If you take away the 68-yard touchdown by Garrett Wilson, which was a bad miss from Malik Hooker, I believe the Jets had 147 yards on the other 11 drives of the game, meaning that they averaged like 13 yards a drive. Not bad.
Yeah, I'll even throw in this. Wilson had 27 pass attempts. The Cowboys had 7 pass deflections and 3 interceptions. So the Cowboys got their hands on more than a quarter of all the Jets passes throughout the game.
Seems good.
Yeah, that seems pretty good. Just a dominant performance. I mean, again, like kind of on the trajectory you want to see for a defense that, again, tries to purport itself to being one of the best in football. This is a team that has led the league in turnovers the last 2 seasons, and is going for tying the record with the Steelers from the 70s. And they're off to a great start. They have 7 takeaways so far through 2 games, including obviously 3 interceptions tonight. Can we just very quickly go over this Micah Parsons stat line real quick?
Yeah, go ahead. Let's do it.
He had 4 tackles and 5 combined total, right? With 2 sacks for 12 yards of total loss, another 3 tackles for a loss, 4 quarterback hits, a pass deflection, a forced fumble, and a fumble recovery.
And almost a touchdown.
Yeah, have yourself a day, Micah Parsons. If you guys didn't watch the game, honestly, I was shocked at how understated that performance was by Micah Parsons. It felt like he was taking Zach Wilson to the ground and almost every single snap. And obviously the rest of the defense was just completely feasting behind him. And the Cowboys just put you in such a position that if you're more than a touchdown behind by the time the fourth quarter arrives, you're just like in this black hole, right? They can pin their ears back. They've got so many different ways to kind of twist around all the different waves of pass rushers they have. And outside of kind of what Zach Wilson was doing near the end of the first half, where he was finding a way to kind of squirt through the rush lanes and take advantage of some of the kind of mistimed twists and stunts and everything, and skirt through and gets a couple of runs. Outside of that, there was just nothing that Wilson could do. And he was just constantly being hit. And when he wasn't being hit and he was able to actually get a throwing motion going, it felt like the Cowboys were tipping the pass, hitting his arm, and balls were just kind of fluttering harmlessly onto the turf for a good portion of them. So the Jets offense was anemic at best for most of the game. And then on top of that, I think we need to have a conversation simply about how good the run defense was, considering that we all knew that that's what they were going to do. We knew that the Cowboys defense was the weak spot was the run game. And the Cowboys, again, outside of some anomaly stuff with the quarterback runs, which also needs to be cleaned up, the Cowboys basically shut down the Jets run game for the entirety of the game.
I want to talk about Micah Parsons just really quickly before we move on. You could convince me that Myles Garrett is the best pure pass rusher in the NFL. You could convince me that Nick Bosa is the best run defending defensive end in the NFL. But you're not going to convince me that there's any player better on defense in the NFL than Micah Parsons. And we saw it in this game, whether it's lining up as a linebacker and shooting a gap and making a tackle for a loss. The Dalvin Cook fumble that he forced, he was playing linebacker and read it perfectly and stripped the ball away, or drawing 2 holding calls in this game that just, they don't show up on the stat sheet, right? If you go look at the box score, they don't show up in the stat sheet, but they're just huge game-changing plays. I think you can have a case, or you can make an argument that Micah Parsons not only is the best defensive player in the league, he's real close to being the best overall player in the NFL. And it seems like in year 3, he's found a way to level up his game even more.
He's on that trajectory right now, right? Like he's affecting the game in a way that I just don't remember very many defensive players doing. I mean, like we've talked about Aaron Donald, and, I think, we've seen guys like Reggie White maybe that, have had these kind of just sort of just taking over games. I mean, I remember there was a time when Deion Sanders would have such an effect on game plans and that sort of thing. But that's the kind of historical. I mean, we could go back to Lawrence Taylor and historical guys, but I mean that's the kind of historic effect that he is having on in these games individually, and it's just amazing to watch. And anytime he needs that the team needs a big play, whether he's the one who's getting the stat on the play, he's usually the guy creating the big play, no matter what happens.
One more player specifically on defense I want to mention, DeMarcus Lawrence.
Okay.
Very first play of the game, makes a tackle for a loss on 3rd down, helps make a stop. And then we saw right before halftime, he kind of barely tips the ball out of Zach Wilson's hand that stops a touchdown, right? If he doesn't get his hand on that ball, all of a sudden what's the score? Is it 18-14 going into halftime, and the Jets get the ball at halftime, and we've got a really close game. Instead, it's 18-10. That's a 4-point play there that just kind of goes unnoticed. I thought he was really good in this game, and the combination of Lawrence and Parsons and all the different things they can do, they can line them up next to each other, they can play opposite of each other. I thought Lawrence was unbelievable in this game.
Well, I mean, we've talked about the Batman and Robin effect of those two, and who's Batman, who's Robin. Honestly, I think we're going to have to move away from that a little bit, because I think there's a third entering into the frame here. I think it's time to have a real serious conversation about what the ceiling is for someone like Oso Odighizuwa.
Yeah,
he had another incredible game, had another sack. This time he opened up a sack for one of Micah Parsons' sacks. He opened up the play. So I think what we're seeing is, obviously Lawrence has been around making plays for the Cowboys a long time. Micah Parsons is, like we said, in conversation for being the best player in football. I think the thing that's really started to take this defensive line to another level is the rise of Oso Odighizuwa and his role as a kind of play everywhere defensive tackle. I mean, you saw him playing on the nose, you see him playing out at 5 technique, and wherever he is, he's just an incredible mismatch. The defensive line is just an absolute ferocious monster for every OC to have to face week in and week out, and I certainly don't envy them.
Last one here, Malik Hooker. He had the bad missed tackle on Garrett Wilson that led to the touchdown that made the game at least a little bit close in the middle. But then he made up for it by having a really nice interception on a play that Trevon Diggs just got beat on. If Malik Hooker would have been a step or two slow, that's another touchdown for Garrett Wilson. Guys are going to make mistakes. They're going to miss tackles. That kind of stuff happens over the course of a game. It's, can you find a way to rebound and make up for your mistake? And I just thought it was really cool that Malik Hooker did. And then we saw Jaron Kearse get an interception at the, near the end of the game. Safeties played outstanding once again.
Yeah, that was just a really poor decision by Zach Wilson to throw that ball when in too high look. Obviously Diggs in trail coverage and just baited into throwing that football on Hooker. I mean, he I don't know if he hit top speed getting out to the outside. It was he saw the whole thing the whole way and made a nice play just to make that interception, obviously kind of sealing the things. And then Kearse obviously having also the other interception on a really nice play caused by Micah Parsons in pursuit along the sideline. So, which is very similar, I think, to, if I remember correctly, what happened with Gilmore's interception last week, right? Yeah. So I think what you see is that if the Cowboys offense gives the defense even a scrap of a chance to get these offenses out of a neutral game script,
They're gonna feast.
they really, really struggled to kind of consistently throw the ball. And look, you just felt it. You felt it as the end of the game was happening. Like literally the play before Micah took that ball away on the fumble recovery. I thought in my brain, it feels like a turnover is about to happen, and it did. It's just like that's it. The inevitability of it is something that is very foreign to Cowboys fans.
It's still weird to me. Like I remember the years like they got
right?
like it was amazing when they got to double-digit interceptions in a season. Like that was incredible. Now it feels weird if you don't get multiple turnovers in a game.
We got to remember, like even look, I'm a little bit older than you, so I'm a '90s Cowboys fan. I grew up in that era, but even those teams, like they were good at stopping the run and they were solid overall. And sometimes they were the number 1 rated defense in the NFL.
They weren't like this.
They weren't like this.
No.
Like I don't think I've ever seen a Cowboys defense like this. And this is sort of reminiscent to what my grandfather used to talk about, the Doomsday defense, or my parents used to talk about that in the 70s. And I think this is the first time in a long time that moniker really fits the Cowboys again.
Up next, Josh Dobbs and the Cardinals. Good luck. Let's talk about Dak Prescott because I thought he was wonderful in this game. We'll get to that next. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Snap into action this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That is $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there is no better time to get in on the action. The app is so easy to use. Plus, there's a wide range of betting options, including the spread, player props, over-unders, and so much more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, the official partner of the NFL. All right, Lana, let's talk about Dak Prescott. Let's start with the negatives. I only saw 2 bad throws today. The one to CeeDee on the sideline that Sauce Gardner almost picked six. He
double clutched it. Well, I said it as he was doing it. I was like, don't throw the ball, don't throw the ball, don't throw the ball. And I couldn't believe he did. And we really dodged a bullet with that.
Yeah, that was a big one. That could have potentially been a game changer right there. They picked that one off and take it to the house. All of a sudden, we've got ourselves a game, right? And the other one was a Jake Ferguson miss in the back of the end zone. Now, he had to layer that throw a little bit. So I understand you could have put a little bit more air under it. But outside of that, I thought Dak was masterful in how he kind of operated this offense, throwing the ball that many times, being that accurate, and just keeping the chains moving over and over again.
Yeah, I mean, over 80% on his completion percentage. I think he was 11.7 CP over E, which is a completion percentage over expectation, which, that's a measurement of what the normal average NFL player would do in those same down and distances. He averaged 11 points above what an average NFL quarterback would do in those situations. 17.5 in total EPA. The Cowboys ended up being 7 of 10 on third down situations. So obviously 70%. Look, we talked about the red zone stuff has got to get better. I feel like a lot of that had to do with several different opportunities kind of spoiled by, like I said, negative plays that happened, whether it was the Tyron Smith holding call, whether it was
the Peyton Hendershot run, jet sweep.
Yeah, the Hendershot run, a couple different runs that were just that just went for negative runs because it was it was still Quentin Williams that you were playing with. You just kind of forgot at different points, right? So once in a while, that defensive line against the Jets really reared their ugly head. They really clamped down the red zone. But outside of that, what we saw from Dak was a guy who seemed a ton more comfortable with what he was doing. He just, look, his yards, his ADOT was down, was way down.
It's going to be down.
Yeah, it's going to be down because that's just part of the offense and also just part of playing kind of a conservative game plan against like we said, one of the best passing defenses in all of football. But I think overall, to operate inside of that game plan, to complete over 80% of your passes, to convert on third down at that rate, to perform above expectation the way he did, I think that kind of shut up a lot of critics. He wasn't asked to play an aggressive game plan, and he operated extremely well inside of that game plan. And I think he showed that, and I think it was important for him and for Mike McCarthy to show, hey, we can play a winning game plan. We can play the smart game plan and still control the game without having to. Instead, it feels like there were times when Kellen Moore would just continue to keep the foot down on the gas instead of doing the smart thing at times. And that's what the Cowboys were doing, is that, look, okay, it feels like a give up, but getting the points here against an inferior offensive team makes sense.
Yep.
And they were.
There's no reason to risk, because if you get an interception there or you have turnover on downs or whatever, you just give the Jets a little bit of life. And that's just not what Mike McCarthy wanted to do here. The most impressive stat for me, 83 offensive plays for the Cowboys.
Yeah.
83.
Jeez.
They were on the field a ton in this game. And you felt it by the end of the fourth quarter. Like, the Jets were gassed. The Cowboys defense was so fresh. Micah Parsons, I think, only played like 34 plays in this game. You're not going to be able to do that every week, but that's pretty incredible. The run game for the Cowboys is still up and down. There's times where they have some really nice runs. It just seems like the consistency isn't there. However, I promise you they're going to have weeks where they don't play Leonard Williams and Quinnen Williams.
That's exactly what I was
Lawrence.
gonna say.
They're going to, easier days are coming for the run game.
Yeah, I mean, like, look, I think we need to, like, despite the fact that the Cowboys had a big game and they won and the offense was able to be efficient, like, I think we also need to remember that who they were playing was a very good team. So the fact that they were able to have some success in some areas is fantastic. The fact that they weren't able to kind of have full success across the board, that's not shocking. They played a top 5 defense, and next week they're not going to face a defense that's as good as what we saw, especially on the interior. So I think it's going to be kind of, again, another revealing situation for the Cowboys when they face an inferior opponent, how they react, and they passed a test. They came out against a tough defense. They played well early, which set them up for success for the rest of the game. And then they played to the strength of their defense. They let their defense choke it out by continuing to methodically stack points, not playing outside of their system, not forcing Dak to throw tight window throws on 3rd and long because you just have a desperation to score touchdowns instead of field goals, which is important, but not more important than winning the game.
Sure.
And I think that they understood that, and they operated within themselves, and they won by 20 plus points against a good team, even that was playing with Zach Wilson at quarterback.
And the last thing I want to mention before we go, it seems like the Cowboys might have themselves a kicker, Brandon Aubrey. I mean, honestly, this might be one of the biggest storylines to come out of this game. 5 for 5 on field goals, made all the extra points, and drilled a 55-yard field goal. I feel better about their kicking situation after today, and I'm sure Mike McCarthy does as well.
Look, I'm not going to be a downer about the kicker when he's I'm not going to be thrilled about the kicking situation when he's good, and I'm not going to be sad about the kicking situation when it's bad, because I think the kicking situation is always temporary. But at least it makes you feel good that the Cowboys understood the decision, made a good had a good decision-making process for selecting a kicker. And as of right now, you're in the sweet spot where you have a young kicker who's kicking well. So that is the best and the most likely chance for having any kind of stable length of period of time with the kicker, as much as you ever can, is to have a young kicker who's in the groove at the moment. Those are usually the periods where you get the longest amount of positive kicking situations.
I will say the other thing I really enjoy about Brandon Aubrey is it seems like he kicks really straight. And I know that seems like weird, but like there's kickers like Greg Zuerlein who has kind of a natural fade on his kicks.
Yep.
And sometimes that fade can be, really exaggerated in some of these games. But for Aubrey, it seems for the most part that he kicks a pretty straight ball. And I feel better about the kicking situation after today, especially after he drilled that 55-yarder. It just doesn't seem like his leg is ever going to be an issue for the Cowboys. He has a monster leg.
Yeah, and that's another key thing, right? Is that ultimately you need to have a monster leg, because you don't have a situation where you have a punter or someone else that can be the kickoff guy. No. So you need to be able to save that roster spot by making
and he drilled every one of them out of the back of the end zone.
Yeah, absolutely. So that wasn't ever a problem, and that never came in. So.
All right, that is it for today's show. We want to thank you for making Locked On Cowboys your first listen every day. Every day, or we'll be back on Tuesday to break down all of the Cowboys film on both sides of the ball. So make sure you tune in for that. We'll answer your questions on Wednesday. Thursday is our crossover show. And then Friday, we'll get you ready for Cowboys Cardinals in week 3. I can't believe we're already into week 3. Wow. I know, we're getting there. Go check out our show on YouTube. We post shows every single day over there. We are free and available on all platforms. Go follow Landon on Twitter at McCoolBCB. I'm at Marcus_Mosher. Enjoy your Victory Monday, and we'll see you right back here on Tuesday.